the rise and fall and rise of Star Trek RPGs. Tabletop. Episode 292 today of Trekland Tuesdays live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming right at you through Portal 47, through the heart of Trekland for some clarity, sanity, and the big picture in all things Star Trek. Hey, I hope you're having a great Tuesday, as every week. Hope your year is proceeding apace. Hope you're having a good time. Hope you are surviving this long hiatus time. It feels like forever until Picard is coming back. The drips of promo teasers and leaks are starting to come, not thick and fast, but thin and fast. If you woke up today and got our Trek Files adventure episode this week, you'll find that Terry Matalas, the showrunner for season 3 Picard, was our guest today on the Trek Files to look at some of his ancestors in Trek, what they did with The Next Generation when it was re-envisioned. So if you haven't seen the Trek Files today, Terry Matalas joins us for that. It's also our 5th anniversary for the Trek Files. Yay, over on Roddenberry. It seems like we're having all kinds of anniversaries lately. Where I'm coming from with this is we're still filling up the times of hiatus. I've been talking a couple of weeks here about different angles of what that might look like, what it might look like for you, keeping you up to date on some special events going on. And one thing that I was thrilled to see was the inspiration for today's show, because it brought to mind, while you're scanning around, long-range scans, short-range scans, for something to take up your Star Trek time in the hiatus without new. And you might be doing a rewatch. You might be doing all kinds of things already, and that's cool. But maybe this is the time you decide to jump in and try out some Star Trek gaming. Now, that could be computer gaming, online, Star Trek Online, MMMMM, massive multiplayer game. It could be, good old tabletop. Now they say tabletop. My invented word before there was a word for it was paper and dice gaming. Because at first I had to separate that from games as in Monopoly and Clue and Risk and chess and checkers. So that was paper and dice gaming to me. And then computer gaming of whatever brand, whatever style, flavor, made it even more so. With first-person shooters, or you still had online role-play games. And I'm talking about from the primitive, or even the arcade stuff. You go to the arcade. You go to the Odyssey 2 in the mini mall in Norman. But you say all that, and we know that games come and go depending on licensees and license holders when it's an official Star Trek game. And we know that a lot of the original Star Trek games, the very early pioneering, were like the Pong days of computer games. People were, the adventure, the type in, the yes, no, turn right, the text-based games were really old too. Somebody needs to do a huge, big encyclopedic history of this. I know at times over my time at Communicator as editor, we had people in the 90s and aughts doing extensive history reviews of Star Trek gaming of all kinds. But a lot of you may realize, if you've been around Trekland for long and you hear me talk, that I don't talk about gaming much. Now, that's not to say that I don't love it and appreciate it and support Star Trek Online, who's amazing now. They're over a decade into this. And the care and feeding, the care and the quality of the different games over the years, the RPGs, the role-play games, the tabletop role-play. Hell, there's even LARPing out there, live-action role-playing, but I don't know how you'd license that. But folks enjoy live-action role-play games too. You don't hear me talk about it a lot because here's one of those deep, dark secrets I'm going to share with you now. I was never much of a gamer. And the reason is I go back to original wave D&D. Now, not out of the box, you had to be a real niche nerd, like my old friend Cody, who used to have the original first edition Dungeons and Dragons books. No, I encountered it in college. It was kind of a wave. We were midway through school, and I was a theater major, communications and journalism minor, actually. And all of a sudden, as if nightly rehearsals weren't bad enough and homework, all my friends in and out of theater were suddenly swamped by this thing called D&D. And I remember I obviously it was a thing because people I knew and respected and friends were swallowed up in it. And I tried to be. But you're talking to the guy who was the stamp collector, model builder, draftsman, blueprinter, writer, art. I mean, when I did something, model rocketer, when I did something, I had like something to show for it. And my first reaction to gaming was, I mean, it was my friends. That was cool. But it was like, we're putting hours and hours and hours into this. And what do we show for it at the end? I've got a piece of paper at the end with nothing on it. I mean, I've got a piece of paper. That's all. I have nothing to show the world. And yeah, your character goes up in levels, whatever. Anyway, so I was a reluctant convert because I very quickly realized that if I didn't hang out with my main friends when they were gaming, I didn't see them. So I would go and be the reluctant, sarcastic, cynical gamer. And oh, how I dreaded eventually those 8 words. I dreaded those 8 words when I heard, oh, we're going to go over to so-and-so's and game tonight. And are we jumping into the 8 words were, no, we have to roll up characters first. I was like, well, that'll be the night. Rolling up characters took 5 or 6 hours, and by then it was midnight or 1. And not that I was, but if it was a school night and we had 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock class or whatever, I learned gaming reluctantly, to the point that, and where I'm circling back around here on a Star Trek show, we've got awesome gaming resources now, official and unofficial. And I go back to the day when, I love this, you may not realize this, and some of you who do know your gaming know, but before, obviously, the current brands on the tabletop side of things, before Modiphius and Star Trek Adventures, there was FASA, or FASA, depending how you want to do it, who had the license. But before that, in the embryonic days of gaming, yeah, the 70s and the 80s, the very first gaming you could do, well, one, it was the ship-based gaming. You probably heard of Starfleet Battles. Well, before that, and I'm talking about, here's the game book. Here's Starfleet Battle Man, Lou Zocchi. Now, Lou Zocchi, his other claim to fame was you could, and I don't have any of them, but you could buy his little plastic ships. Speaking of little ships and our famous line now, you could get his little ships to battle with, and if you couldn't afford them or couldn't find them, he very nicely provided, with the turns and all that. But this was ship-to-ship combat, right? He was doing this. Meanwhile, Starfleet Battles was treading this the great classic Starfleet Battles game that went from Klingons, Romulans, and Federation to using Gorn and what were the other guys? They made up an alien race. That was ship-to-ship fighting only, no interplay, no character base. The same size book here, and I'm mad because it's back and I haven't found it lately. But I have it because I made a scan. The first Star Trek RPG game was in a book about that size booklet with the big purple planet on the front, because whether they were licensed or not, it was hard to get decent licensed images in 1977, 76. Star Trek Adventure Role-Playing in the Final Frontier. So I'm showing you that minus my book. His gimmick on the side, though, aside from the booklet, was he did have, of course, if you gamed, you had to have your little figures, and he had a series of these. And of course, I was thrilled to do this because finally, if I'm going to be stuck gaming with friends who all love gaming, and a lot of friends who were both, hey, it was theater and it was art people. They were not what we used to call them. They weren't the gaming tech heads. They didn't hide behind their stand-ups and go. I had friends who created scenarios back before that was a thing. They created game systems. I had the friends who would take a rock album and create a dungeon where every song had a clue on the album to what was going on. I had a friend who we were 3 or 4 rooms into it before I realized he had done a scenario. Looking at you, Kevin. The whole scenario was Wizard of Oz characters. The first clue was a little dog that ran through the room, and we didn't know. Anyway. And I'm talking about friends who would do the multiverse beam-ins, which was one of my sanity points. And they were combining different game systems, characters and tools and weapons and things on the fly to make it all make sense. And friends who would invent their own systems because things they didn't like in the basic D&D system or whatever else they were playing back in those days. Traveler, I remember, you know, and before we had some standardized systems too. But of course, me being me back in those days was like, why don't we role play Star Trek? Well, we tried. The official, such as it was, system, and the game system was clunky, crappy, slow. All my D&D friends were pulling their hair out. See how I know my way around little gaming. And so I challenged my good friend Cody. I said, well, let's sit down. Let's design a game. Let's do a Star Trek game that has a better system to it. You handle the system. I'll handle the Star Trek. And we did. We did. And I designed a scenario. Although everyone said, okay, but if we do this, you're always going to DM or GM in the PC world. You're always going to DM it because none of us stand a chance if you're playing a character. You'll always know something that nobody else knew, and you'll pull it out about a tricorder or a phaser, and we'll enter some planet, and we'll be lost. So my penance was, if we're going to do this, I had to be the DM. Well, thank God by this time we're into grad school and people are running around and having jobs. But I did design a scenario. It had a planet-based and a ship-based component. You found a mystery ship adrift in orbit of this planet. You went to the ship, then it took you down to the surface, and there was an avianoid race that was having a civil war, and there was all this intrigue, and the ones who were wanting to join the Federation were our friends. And, you know, so you rolled up your ship, and you're stalking the ship, and you can't find clues, and you finally find a clue to go down the surface. And this avianoid race were the Kowin, get it? Kowin, yeah, okay. And then you were searching rooms on the surface. And I thought it went great. We played it once. I think I may have the paper to it somewhere. But after that, it was exhausting. I had to come up with an end scenario because it was all on me. Everybody enjoyed it. And about that time, after we went to the trouble to develop and all of that, well, guess what came out? Yeah, the original FASA edition role-playing game from FASA. This was, the original was just too limited. And by that time, role-playing had blown up big, I tell you. But we took a lot of abuse in college. I had one professor. She was an icon, and she was nearing retirement. And she was very zealous of her students and their time and what they were doing. And are you out partying all night? Are you getting your rest for rehearsal and class? And when the D&D wave took over, Dr. Summers, there's a theater name for her now. But I remember Dorothy one day saying, well, if you boys are going to stay up all night playing cops and robbers, I don't know how you're going to have anything left in your tank to go with the next day. So that became the thing. Yeah. Hey, you want to play some cops and robbers tonight? Yeah. As long as it had the ampersand in the middle. But my relationship with Star Trek gaming was that I'm not a gamer. I had to do my own thing so that the gamers would do it. Then as soon as we got going, then everybody had to learn the FASA system if they wanted to do that. And yeah, I bought some books because one thing, we're in the fallow times here, in between movies even, and these game books are the cool thing was having to come up with all this background to fill the gaps. Hence where I got my phrase, gap filling. The gamers, you need so much detail. You need such a level of texture and depth. And you don't get that. You didn't get that from 80 hours, piddling along with 2 new hours every couple of years. You had to have all that. And it was a dead little show, or it was moving into a movie era where you only got a couple of hours every 2 or 3 years. Nobody cared. It didn't bother a thing. So FASA blows up. The Monster Maroons take over. We're into that era. If you are a gamer, you're gaming FASA. And I've got 3 or 4 of the rule books. The Orions and the Romulans and the... can I show you? I have the Klingon set because what else are you going to do, right? And there's your Klingon manual. And you could do ships and you could do characters. If you were doing ships, there's your... Yeah. And scenarios are included here to start you off. And then, of course, they're off and running. And that's where they're making their money, is selling scenario books and all that. Creative people, once again, are coming up with their own scenarios and not having to, purchase one. Well, then what happens? What upsets the apple cart in our nice, easygoing 80s. Well, here comes Next Generation. And of course, FASA wants to update their license. Of course, they need a depth. Of course, after 1 year, early, pre-debut, there's not near enough detail to jump you ahead 80 years and flesh out the universe at that time. So what do? And I cannot find my copy, but I have it. It's almost an inch thick, new, updated next gen, just for the 24th century, the 24th century officer's manual, I think it was called. And it was thick, but what happened at the end there? In the ongoing friction between Gene's office, represented by Richard Arnold, and licensing, all things licensing, the minute the game book hit, it became a case of, oh my God, this is not Star Trek. You've invented all of this. And the poor gamers are going, and the game company is like, well, we need that to function. It's like, no, you cannot use anything that has not been on screen after 1 season of Next Generation. And that's where, yeah, the first year book was purple, about an inch thick. Well, that's where the stripped down first year source book came, full of licensed photos, no art. It was only very basic artwork and photos now, and it's that thick. So, the gaming of Next Generation did not take off very well. Well, a few years later, we're spinning out new Star Trek shows. DS9's coming along, Voyager's coming along, but by then, FASA had lost its license, given away. It lay fallow for a while. Then a company called Last Unicorn had the Star Trek license for a while. Then they were upended when the license was given to Decipher. And part of that was mixed in with Decipher having the official fan club and communicator and all that. And Decipher joined the Star Trek family of licensees until it wasn't. Now, one thing, a lot of the Last Unicorn group was brought over and hired full blast. And of course, Decipher was doing collectible card games. The gaming world was diversifying. Computer games were coming along, and everybody was in love with the tech, the 8-bit and whatever. 3 or 4 companies at one time had the digital game license, the computer game license, and lavish productions. If you're talking about Star Trek, board the computer game. The Star Trek Klingon computer game that Robert O'Reilly played a Klingon other than Gowron, but nobody remembers that. They just see those pictures and call him Gowron. And a lot of folks had that game. You can still find a lot of this out there. The glory games of the overexpanded 90s. And then, somewhere between the dot-com boom on the digital side and just the license succumbing to what was going on by then, which was everything going visual and digital, and tabletop gaming losing its luster. It's just another aspect of the whole, hey, look at the CGI in this movie. No one knows how to do stunt work anymore. No one knows how to drive car crashes. Nobody knows how to stunt and taking a fall. No practical effects people are there to create the smoke and make this incredible complex box. There's nobody stretching a skin over Armin Shimmerman's face for a face in a box when you could just CG it, which means the CG license goes insane. And after a while, people are like, I don't believe this anymore. It's too incredible. That was really affecting the game world too. And, I'm preaching the choir. A lot of you are way more in your game depth than I am. But just from a mainstream Star Trek point of view, there's a phrase, from mainstream and looking over at gaming, which I was never adept to, and also grew cautious because licenses turned over every 3 or 4 years. And none of this was canon. It was no more canon if the pro novels and the comics weren't canon. Oh my God, the games at the time they're published lean on canon, as FASA found out. So the last 10 years or so, in the fallow times, again, we had years where nobody cared. Pocket Books was allowed to build this insanely detailed backstory, cohesive universe through the novels. And yes, Star Trek Online finally had its birth pangs through different companies, finally settled in with Cryptic, and has been going strong. And a chunk of that is due to the insanely detailed continuity they've built, both threading into existing timeline canon and also jumping ahead their 40, 50 years and filling all that in and keeping it consistent from a star map on up to campaign to campaign. The way that the needs of a multiplayer game drive that. And multiplayer kind of bringing back that band of brothers feeling, that joint. Even you might be playing with strangers, you might be playing with your friends. But now, thank you, Will, and thanks to others, now we have the term tabletop, since I had to invent paper and dice games at the time to explain what I meant. Oh, when I worked in news, we had a copy editor who was also the entertainment editor, but she retired and gave way for me to take that position later. But there for a long time, if you said gaming around her, she's thinking gambling. And I'm talking about doing a story on some gamers, and she said, we can't do gambling stories, it's the postal laws. I'm like, no, Delane. If I mean gambling, I'll say gambling. But she grew up at a time when gaming meant gambling. They were synonymous. So that was an era, but we were fine. We were fine with that. But I just want to say, back in the day, I did have my time. I meant to show this off. This was the only package of figures I bought, right? Adventure Gaming Miniatures, right. Oh, and of course, there's the densely dense. How to paint your figures. I bought this package. Who's in this package? You got 3 in this one. Who's in it? It's Spock. He very smartly put Kirk in one set of 3 and Kirk in another one. But I have it because, of course, it's not about Spock there. It's about, and Uhura is in this set. You got little Ed McCoy, right? Yeah, with his hypo there. You got little Ed McCoy. When we would have those combined universe games that my smart gaming friends were able to handle, I would always play a McCoy. I would make up stats from some system, but we would have gunslingers from Old West games and sci-fi, Kevin's sci-fi Space Ranger with the over and under laser carbine. We would have gunslingers from the Old West and sci-fi characters and McCoy and you name your poison. And we would have a scenario together. And yeah, I remember the days of the sadistic DMs who the only reason they're gaming is so they can kill everybody at the end. They don't care. And how they'd get so pissed off when somebody would figure out a way to outsmart their death scenario. It got crazy at times. Oh, the hours we wasted. I finally just gave in. And I, again, slid in my way. Well, we've come a long way. And gaming overall, no matter what technology or what level you're doing it, has never gone away, obviously. And, of course, Star Trek gaming reflects the outside world of gaming. And, gang, I am not an expert on the history of gaming, as you can tell. But I know watching my perch, watching Star Trek go along, what's been interesting. And I was a little sad, despite my roots. I was a little sad, there for a decade or so. Sure, Star Trek Online was great, and you had ship-to-ship combat, and you had the personal, and you had storytelling and campaigning and all that. But as a reflection of the outside world, until about 10 years or so, and the rise of virtual streaming, as well as what's on some niche, streaming channel, real channels, tabletop was pretty much drying up. So thank you to all the geeks out there who kind of brought tabletop back, but they're by the late 90s and the early aughts. Only your hardcore were playing D&D, much less Star Trek tabletop. So yeah, there's been a rebirth and all of that. The D&D brand, I know they're having some controversies about license and common and all of that, because it's always been as open as, it began. Star Trek fan fiction and fan films all began with fans going, fine, you're not going to give it to us, we'll do it ourselves. You're going to go away for 10 years? Fine. We're going to love this in spite of you, and we'll make it ourselves. And that's the way gaming has always been, although gaming encourages that anyway. Here's the rule book, bang, go sit down and make your own campaigns and scenarios. And at times here, invent your own format, your own universe. It's been as thrillingly creative for those folks as any CGI model building or analog model building or cosplay or fan fiction, fan artistry, any of the expressions to express your love for what it is that's motivating you. And in this case, it's Star Trek. And gamers are no different. And that is why, coming full circle, what prompted this outburst today is just 2 or 3 weeks ago, the lovely and talented, my good friend, Eliza Pearl, who I met as the captain of the McGinley here in LA a few years back when the improvised generation was improvising TNG era Star Trek here, and especially pre-pandemic the pandemic pretty much has seen people's lives move on and go on. But it's been fascinating to watch what she and others are doing as a paying career, combining acting and gaming, their nerd side, to the point where I just had one of those wow moments. I realized this is every Monday night. You can, and thanks to streaming and the virtual revolution, all of this vortex of factors have all come together to the point now where, number one, I should say, roleplay is back. Tabletop is back. Star Trek tabletop is back. And mainly thanks to the folks at Modiphius and Star Trek Adventures. And there have been some different kinds of ship-to-ship, and the one with the hex and the clicks and all of that. Some of them have come and gone. Now you've got mobile. You've got Starfleet mobile device gaming for what you want. And a lot of it's ship-to-ship. But if you want old school character-based RPGing, you want old school D&D and Star Trek Adventures is where it's at, and officially licensed. And they've come on and they've put a ton of old school craftsmanship and work into their game. And it's amazing that I was kind of brought up to date here. Monday nights. Now, what's impressive is, number one, you've got gamers build. So if you can have anime voice actors known by their faces, which is cool, then surely we can have our star gamers gaming. So Clear Skies Perseverance is a Star Trek adventure tabletop roleplay live play series that you can be part of. They've had a preview coming January 30th. They're premiering February 6th. I may do more with this coming up, but it blew me away to realize that's what the state of things is. Not only is it happening, and yeah, Star Trek Adventures from Modiphius, but they're using, I want to make sure I've got this, they're using Star Trek Online's Twitch channel. So there is a cooperation. It's not a competition between the tabletoppers and the online folks. And, you know, in this era of, sure, the film is first, the screen is first, but we're trying to bring everything adjacent to the screen when it comes to Star Trek universe and Star Trek canon. We're trying to get it as cohesive as possible and tear down the walls wherever we can and get out of the business models and who's getting residuals and who's not. And how do we dance around when we 10 years later or 3 years later, we want to change something that was set down here? It happens. That's the risk you take. If you dive into comics and books and Star Trek world or games or what have you, you know, risk is your business. It may all be wiped away in a few years. And that's as shown writ large on the Star Wars universe side, where they adapted the Star Trek model after years of having everything goes. Anything goes. But this is great. Monday nights, 6 to 9 Pacific, I should say. So 9 to midnight Eastern. It's on Twitch TV. It's on Twitch. It's Cryptic Studios channel there, the Star Trek Online. And Streampunks is also the umbrella producer there. So, I mean, look, that's what impressed me was all of these affiliated sponsors at it, all right? But that's the state of things. There's a little bit of that. And to show that, I'm very proud of this. Do I have any Star Trek Adventure manual? No, I'm still not a gamer, guys. Even though now I have the confidence that, look, Online's had an incredible decade and more. That's stability. That's not a one-off licensee coming and going with their game. And Star Trek Adventures is put a massive amount of work into it. I'm especially proud because they reached out, and I don't have a basic gaming manual for Adventures, but I have the Klingon manual. And we've come from, this to, this is the deluxe, the leather cover, which is awesome, awesome, awesome. But I have this especially. I might want to jump in sometime. I kept thinking a demo at a con would be a cool experience event. It never happened. All the years STO was early on. I was like, how about a Virgin Gamer jump down to do a demo? I'll do that. And got talked about off and on. It's fine. Didn't happen. But I love this because we were able to help facilitate between Modiphius and Star Trek Adventures and the folks who, Epic Inc., and the folks who publish our Stellar Cartography. we were able to set up to where they could have the Klingon map with Klingon titles, the corrected one from 2018, as their frontispiece. And then a little close-up of the galaxy there along the border for the aft's piece, I guess. So, no, I'm not a big-time gamer, but I can sure appreciate from this vantage point what's going on in game world, and it does my heart good. And I know it's happening in the culture at large. People want the organic connection, and that's not to say they can't get it with Star Trek Online, or it wouldn't be as popular as it is now. But all these licensees, they're made to pay attention, but they're all being put together by so many fans. I don't have to tell you about the gang at STO, from my good buddy and one-time neighbor Thomas Marone, all the way down, up and down the team, happening at Star Trek Adventures. You cannot come into these cold. Even if you did, if you come from a game background, but you don't know the universe, you've got to sit down and do your research. It's amazing how that's starting to, we knew that, even about the core of the universe, what's on screen. And more, we're seeing that happen. It's not we've come so far from the days you had to hide it because somebody thought you might steal props and costumes from or leak everything to the press. We've come so far from 1987 to today, when all these ancillary licensees and projects and media and platforms, much less what we're getting our primary core on screen, the impact and value of having at least a little bit of stake in Star Trek, at least having some awareness, much less a deep dive in. So Eliza was telling me about this, and it just blew me away. Not that we haven't got to the point where we're live action role playing and participatory and all that as theater, as entertainment itself. Whatever the experience buy-in is for fans watching at home, all the different options there, or it's seen as a commercial to get people to go buy the games and sit at home as if you needed a whole lot of push. A lot of times it's not that people don't want to game Star Trek. It's they're not over the hump of gaming. And so if you're showing the fun of, it's my God, how many decades have I sat through horrible infomercials? Well, if that's an infomercial for Star Trek gaming, so be it. It's the most entertaining one yet. And when you've gotten actual actors, and by the way, that lineup of faces, you may know them in the gaming community, but I'm sure Bonnie Gordon's face you'll know, especially after she co-hosted. She's invisible as the voice of the protostar computer no longer. She's getting herself out there in this world as well, and she's awesome, and she's in the cast for that. So we'll put a link up at some point here, and I'll have it for sure. We'll have it up if you're watching us live and later. But it just sat me back. Every once in a while, you have one of those aha moments where you realize it's a milestone. And maybe this isn't the biggest milestone, but it sure hit me. It was connected to me, people I know. But what struck me was, look at the commercial involvement. This is not just people randomly off. This is a supported, sponsored, valued, which means this is where the world's going. This is where we've gotten to. Maybe part of it was accelerated by the pandemic and people getting more used to being virtual. Twitch was a thing before the pandemic, I know. But so many more people, their consciousness is about that. And that it doesn't have to be huge, high-end, branded from a network to be entertaining and to be quality. So a shout out to everyone on the Clear Skies Perseverance series. It's Monday nights. The premiere is February 6th, which there you go. They had a preview night on the 30th coming up. So you can go and join. This was, where did I find this? Twitter and Facebook. This was Streampunk's RPG, which is kind of the producer. We'll have more on this and get more out to you. But again, just because I am not a deep diving gamer doesn't mean that I don't totally appreciate, especially now the current licensees have gone so way overboard for consistency and keeping their own stories internally consistent and actually kind of reaching out to each other, the big two here, where they need to, which is trepidatious, which you're walking on eggshells because you don't want to give away your creative freedom. You're already bowing down to the licensees, folks in licensing who themselves are only captive to what the shows want to do, which is why Kirsten Byers' position there since the comeback of Discovery has been pivotal. But now we're not talking just about books and comics. We're talking about games, and both games. And it's really complicated. And we can't stop time and freeze everything in amber. We still want to have our live action on screen new Trek of any era and century. So the juggling match is amazing. People that sit at home and want a Monday morning quarterback the whole thing, I don't know how you exist without Prophet's time. How do you exist in linear time and handle being able to roll with that? But that's an exciting time. So yay for where we are, and yay for the fact that tabletop has come back to hold up its own and be extremely popular. A whole new generation, and you can watch the growing pains that I've been watching here with the D&D current owners. But from the little scrabbly game that was kind of the cult underground thing to blowing up mainstream and then becoming old hat. It's old-fashioned. The computers are glitzier, flashier, cooler. And every year the computers are getting, whether it's on your home computer or it's an arcade game or it's online now. However, the tech is evolving madly in the 90s and the aughts and the teens and now the 20s. Where is there room for paper and dice games in that? Well, apparently there's plenty of room for paper and dice games in that. And board games themselves are never gone out of style. And boy, did we learn that in the pandemic. Big time. Anyway, yeah. So not my wheelhouse, kids, but enough of an eyewitness, and I have my little McCoy lead figure. Enough of an eyewitness to bring a little perspective, that little Trekland point of view to that, and get you thinking. So that yes, it's still going to be another 3 weeks. The 16th of February, we've got another 3 weeks, I think, until Picard's return. And if you're casting about to find something to fill up your hiatus time, there you go. One idea. And it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to even watch others playing to get the idea of what can happen. Your friends just might enjoy it. Or you might have a gaming friend who never thought of you as the type. Maybe you already know someone to go talk to. Just a way to fill up the time. If you've already got your time filled, you can kind of sit back and watch it fly by on all your socials and see what's going on. But it's very definitely Star Trek is following the global trend of the big comeback of tabletop gaming, and especially RPGs, and especially our Star Trek realm. So yay, yay, yay. You know what? I almost would expect that some gamers who are up for something new, all the FASA rule books, there's tons of it out there. It hasn't gone away. I've got my boxes sitting here. It's on eBay. You've probably got friends or parents of friends who've got this stuff in their closets still. It would be funny to see some historical. It'd be cute. It would be interesting to see some historical gaming going on, and including the Adventures in the Final Frontier gaming with the clunky original system. You know what? I should go see if there's any way I can dig out our original scenario and rules and see if that would still work. That would be a hoot. That would be a hoot. If we ever have an historical gaming convention, like gathering the Egyptian archaeologists or something, that would be a hoot too. You could even have a digital arcade wing over there. I know some people who love playing, like the original, what is it, the Battle Simulator that came out with motion picture. Fun stuff, kids, fun stuff. And again, not having a weekly Star Trek lets us, it's a pain in some ways, and we're so spoiled now after the last couple of years, but it actually lets you breathe a little and look around and see what else you haven't thought of. So thanks for letting me sit here and look around and breathe a little, figure out what we haven't thought of with you today. I do want to say, of course, my shout out to everybody who's in my Patreon. Boom. Hey, yeah, I have 2 levels. We have a $5 and $10 level. So our TTL Club, thank you so much to Diane Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne-Marie Siegel, Keith Rombach, Justin Porteous, Nathaniel Robinson, Andrew Drzymski, Pranakasha Productions, Gay Clevin Lundstrom, and Galinda Bruton. And thanks so much to our live wires, Hubbard, Gun Johnson, Robert McLean, Alan Hoensi, J.R. Poole, Byron Bailey, Dave Gregory, and Casey Shafsky. Thanks a lot, guys and gals and peeps. And if you'd like to help out too, it's getting close to the end of the month. That's when Patreon does this. I keep it a simple $5 and $10, like I mentioned, for a shout out, and getting there soon. Eventual access to all these interviews from the earlier years of Portal 47. Patreon.com/Trekland Live, along with all the other Patreon folks that are there. So thank you, guys and gals, for the help every week. We're about to start exploring some new features, what we're doing here. Meanwhile, I'm very excited. We've got folks signing up now, some of the cruisers and people who aren't cruising at all. On February 23rd, especially, our LA Way Days. It's a day of location films. The tours I do are location sites around LA. The ones you know, which are going to be on this tour, and the ones you're pretty obscure about. We've got the list from locations from call sheets. I've got the database. We're adding new things from Picard season 1, 2, and 3 to come. So it's February 23rd, the day before they disembark. But you don't have to be on the cruise. You can just come. LarryNemecek.com. You can get on my mailing list there. You can click on that link at the top of the page and just see generally what's going on. We've got 4 seats left, I should mention, as of this time, in the van unless I get a wave of 10 people and we bump up to a bigger minibus. Right now, I've got 4 seats left for the Thursday. And the day after the cruise is back, which is, again, open to anyone, I'm pretty much thinking about that's the one that's not as popular as the first. I'm pretty much about ready to close that. So if you're interested, especially in the 4th, get a hold of I've got early deadlines to meet with vehicles and costs. So that's where that is. But I can't wait. And hopefully, I know some of them are some of our global fans and travelers who have not been to the States at all. So it's going to be a hoot. I as much as I love meeting new people, especially when they're from around the world, and Star Trek is uniting everybody. It's awesome. It's a great recharge. But speaking of recharges, like I said, happy 5th anniversary this week to the Trek Files, our 5th anniversary show. We're about to wrap up the season, but we're going to have this anniversary show first with the great Terry Matalas, showrunner for Picard season 3, executive producer since season 2. He's our guest, and we're diving back into some seminal, what do we change? What do we keep the same? Kind of questions that they were facing in 1986 with a new document. And Terry is awesome. We ran out of time, so I know we're going to have him back soon, hopefully before Picard premieres. So you want to check that out at the Trek Files. And our document, of course, is always on Facebook, but you can get it at all the Roddenberry podcasts at podcast.roddenberry.com. And for now, that's going to be it. If you're watching me now and you want to catch me on Twitter or Mastodon, it's Larry Nemecek, and soon to be another couple of spaces too. Larry Nemecek's Trekland. Please like and subscribe us here on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, if you want to deep dive all year long, don't have the post-con blues or the post-cruise blues, join Portal 47, and it's like a mini-con all year long, portal47.net. And our TeePublic store, they have sales twice a month. That's going. You never know when that's going to pop up. So get on my socials and you'll see you can get your own little swag bits and pieces. Yeah, that's it. If you are watching us live here, or I'm sorry, if you're watching us later, maybe you'll have a chance sometime to catch us live and enjoy this great TTL community. But if you are watching later, please leave comments, because we do go back. I get the alerts and we bop in, okay? Like and subscribe and share and do all the things. Because, I'm going to also say, as I leave you on the YouTube edit, stay healthy out there, man. Do all the things, please. Stay woke. Check your sources. And trek well, everybody.